Which these situations are always so confusing to me. I don't know how they get handled legally. Like, I hear that because it like basically the whole reason the Me Too movement even started is because things weren't being handled legally. Women would try to go to the police. They either weren't believed or swept under the rug or no one was prosecuted. So the solution was to go public because that's the only way we can maybe make people pay. And then people started realizing when they go public, it turns out there's a slew of other victims for a lot of these people who can attest and have their own accounts and stories. Which at that point kind of forces law enforcement to get involved. And it's still that way. Women still aren't believed. It still gets swept under the rug. I mean, look at what we learned from the UK. The UK basically doesn't care at all. But now shifting over to the Andrew Callaghan situation, he has finally responded to allegations in the situation to some capacity. I off the rip found this response a little irritating, like many people, because you can see obviously when this from what I understand, this channel only had about 120 subscribers or something like that before this video dropped, and now you can see it's up to 5,000. So clearly this is its first attention, but I thought him showing his response video on a small channel, I, like many people, felt that's putting it in a place where people are less likely to see it, which is pretty disingenuous and fucked up. It's a very important thing. And I can understand the legal or business end of it, maybe, of like, you don't want to associate the situation with the brand Channel 5 because several people work there and the content is more of a focus on the people that are being interviewed and less so what's happening. But the reason I still have a problem with it, though, is because Channel 5 as a brand was leveraged and used in a lot of these assaults. So I think because of that, it's only fair, only consistent, and also important for this response to also be on the Channel 5 story. If you really want to do news coverage and radical empathy, you know, teach that, it would be radically empathetic of you to disregard everything legally and business-wise and just do the humane thing and share this video as much as possible, in my opinion. But I don't know. Maybe there's a specific reason other than that. Maybe his legal team wouldn't let him. Maybe he even tried. I don't know. But that was my first thought, like many people's, off the rip. So just going in, that's already what I'm thinking. And this was the response.
All right. I never thought I'd make a video like this, but I think there's an important conversation to be had, and I just want to be fully accountable, honest, and transparent with all of you guys. So I'd like to start by thanking every single person who's came out in the past week to speak about different ways in which my behavior has made them feel uncomfortable or pressured during a sexual situation, and to people who said that I've made unwanted advances and had a hard time with rejection. I'm sure this was not easy to do. It's never easy to speak out, and it was hard for me to hear as well, because to be honest with you, up until this point, I didn't even really realize that I had this pattern that had affected multiple people. I'd also like to apologize for my silence. I think that when this stuff...
yeah, the pattern thing makes me feel weird, because I don't know. Maybe it's hard for us to notice patterns that we engage in. It's certainly hard for us to acknowledge always our role in traumatic cycles that we keep reenacting or playing out until maybe some of us like get therapy or on medication or somehow have perspective brought to us that like, hey, you're stuck in a cycle and there's a way to break the cycle that would be really beneficial for you. But I don't know. I don't know.
Stuff first came out, I was in a state of denial and shock. I was, just riding the high from my movie that just came out. And then within 48 hours, I was denounced by my closest collaborators. And my name was printed in 40 different news outlets next to the words sexual misconduct. And I just kind of spiraled into a mental health crisis. I'm okay now, but I don't really think this is about me. This is about the people.
I think that's important. I think it's fair because everyone at this point knew that he had checked himself into a mental hospital, for his own safety. So I think it was important for him to address that. But I also love that it was quickly cut short and quickly followed up with, this focus is not on me, because that is 100% true. While he may be going through something and that is hard and it's important that he gets the help he needs, the primary focus here should be on his victims and you know, their well-being and their justice.
People that I've affected. So I just want to express my complete sympathy, respect, and support for anyone who I've done wrong by. And I really want to do better and be fully accountable for everything that I've done. So that being said, I want to make a few things clear. I've always taken no for an answer as far as consent.
See, and I have a problem there. So that I would say no, like that's not true categorically. Like I've always taken no for an answer, meaning like if the final word was no, I would not push forward. However, that's not true. And maybe this is what he's learning now. But like if you don't let the last word be no, if you keep asking after you get a no, then no doesn't mean no, and you're not taking no for an answer. You're just taking it as ask again, you know? So I think at best case scenario, that's unfortunate phrasing, because to take no for an answer means the first time you hear it, you accept it and you move on. And to do that without like a specific reason of like, oh, I didn't hear you or it wasn't clear to me, shows that like you aren't taking no for an answer fundamentally. So I don't think that's true. I think that is a miscategorization at best, and at worst a specific reframing.
I've never overstepped that line.
The line was overstepped, 100%. The line of no was 1000% overstepped. Coercion, especially in the way we saw it with him and the way it's reported, is 100% overstepping. You're not accepting no and going so far as to even physically engage people after no has been outlined, both, you know, before you like communications and text before meeting up, while meeting up, and then leading up to a physical engagement. Everything about that is boundary crossing and line crossing, and it only is further and further across that line, especially the last bit.
But, you know, I think I want to have a more nuanced and important conversation about power dynamics, pressure, and coercion. Because,
and that's the part where I think that's what makes me say, like, maybe this is what he's learning now. Maybe he's finally coming to that conclusion. I don't understand necessarily how or why, but that's only because I was shown that or learned that or discovered that, however it went for me. That part of my misogynistic deprogramming happened at a younger age. So anytime stuff like happens, like with that, me personally, it's hard for me to understand how people didn't get there sooner when they're older than me, which is ridiculous because obviously everyone grows at different rates. Everyone starts in different places. A lot of my deprogramming happened in my 20s. Yeah, like I don't know how old I was exactly when I went through that stage of like unlearning toxic mentalities or behaviors, but I know I was younger, like late teens, early 20s. So it's difficult for me to see someone almost 30 just now learning that. And part of my brain wants to say this is a willing ignorance, but I obviously can't know that. I literally can't know that. I don't know this man. And I don't know most people that we see stories about, but I know how I feel. So it's hard for me to say around situations like that. But obviously everyone moves at their own pace, starts at their own location, and is on their own journey of growth.
Like I said, I think for a long time, I was behaving in a way that I actually thought was normal.
100% adapt. Yeah, I learn things all the time. I almost for certain making mistakes daily. I am almost for certain engaging in horrible toxic behaviors or negative cycles or perpetuating them daily, or at the very least being a passive bystander in them happening around me. But all I can do as a person is my best. I try to make a genuine effort to learn as much as I can and to grow as much as I can and to change my behavior. And I have definitely I am able to see some places I've grown in. I am able to notice specifically some places I've deprogrammed in, but I have blind spots. Everyone has blind spots. And like I said, everyone's on their own journey and only grows as fast as they grow for the reasons and situations they end up in. So like, I fully anticipate to learn for the rest of my life things about myself that I could do better. But that's exciting to me. It also, in my opinion, takes the pressure off. I'm like, I'm never going to be perfect, so I should never expect myself to be. But I should expect me to always try to do the right thing. I don't think I'm asking too much of myself to just try and be a good person. And so I will always try to do that. Knowing I will fail, I will try to do that. Same here. So many people lack self-awareness and don't work on themselves at all, and that's what needs to change, the selfishness. 100%. I think a problem is some people, especially on the liberal side, on the left side of things, and there's a degree of this in the religious side too, and the religious right side too, but I think some people think there's like a max level you can reach in like holiness or like wokeness or like politically correctness, and they just like, I'm done. I've mastered all 4 elements. I know everything there is to know about being a good person. I am physically incapable of thinking a prejudiced thought, a racist thought, a homophobic thought, or transphobic thought. There's absolutely no way I have any sort of internalized issues like that. I'm all good, homie. And that's never going to happen ever. I literally identify as a trans non-binary person, and I constantly misgender myself but never anyone else, and have a ton of internalized transphobia and shame from being raised as a shameful Irish Catholic. Like, there is a lot of internalized hatred I have. And a lot of that internalized hatred from just being shoved in the closet probably manifests every now and then in some weird projecty crap. Now, I try very hard to learn more, and the more I learn about myself and the more I become comfortable with myself, the better that specifically gets. But my point is, I, as a person, even struggle with, internalized societal views handed down to me about my own identity. So the chances of me having those sort of opinions or understandings about communities I'm not a part of is really high, because I understand even less about their experience, their perspective, their lives, So I don't know. I get that we're all flawed and we all learn at different rates, but it's tough for me to hear someone as old as he says, saying something like, when someone tells me no over and over again and you just keep asking until you eventually get a yes, I didn't know that was a problem. Because I don't know, personally, and maybe it's just the friends I happen to have at this point in my life, but like, I thought we had all learned that like 10 years ago. I thought we were all on that page and been there, done that. Like, that's uncool. I've been making jokes about how the old way of life really up our generation, like the whole like, oh yeah, my grandpa followed my grandma 3 states and like just kept showing up in her life with a flower and being like, will you take me now? And like, she turned him down over and over again until finally she said yes, and they've been married for 40 years and they kind of hate each other, but they had a lot of kids and it's all good now because she couldn't get a job anyway, so it was like, shack up with this dude or die poor and alone. You know what I mean? Like, that mentality is what gave way to the no doesn't mean no. And I made jokes about how that romantic view on relationships was incredibly toxic and problematic and paved. I've been making those jokes for at least 10 years of my life now. So that's why it's so shocking for me to hear someone come to that conclusion at this point.
I thought that,
but I can't call that out as invalid because, like I said, everyone grows at a different rate.
From the bar alone made you a loser.
I can understand that. That's a big part of toxic masculinity. If you go home from the bar alone, you're a loser. Like only like cool, desirable, alpha, whatever the you want to call it. Only those sorts of people, are leaving the bar with people, and anyone who doesn't is like a social reject. I can understand that pressure, but I've just never been a confrontational enough person to like ever like try that. I pretty much instantly feel bad. I remember when I was like I you not, 14 or 15, and I think I was hanging out with a friend of mine who was talking about how there was this guy that worked at a store that was like 18, 19 that really liked her, and they were hanging out, and he had been hitting on her a lot, and how she wanted to go see him at a store. And I was already like talking to her and learning about that sort of situation, being like, yo, this seems really weird. I don't know if that's okay. But and that's a whole other thing in society that I'm not even trying to talk about right now. But also that day, while we were walking around the mall, I witnessed like several people, and we weren't like together. We were literally just friends. Several people like whistled at her or catcalled or whatever in the mall. And obviously this is like early 2000s, so this crap ran rampant back then. But it was that day, in that moment, I realized, oh my God, it's got to be kind of horrifying to be a woman. Like, this was the day I realized that, like, women can't go anywhere without strangers who I'm terrified of. I'm terrified of strangers. I'm terrified of my classmates. My classmates bullying me, and I don't even, like, I'm terrified of public bathrooms. I'm terrified of strangers. I don't want anyone to even look at me, let alone talk to me. But, like, if I was a girl and I was walking around, it would pretty much be guaranteed, if I was in public for an extended period of time, that strangers would interact with me. Like, either like come up to me and want to talk for a little bit, or yell at me from like across an area. And I remember that idea horrified me. Like, I thought that was so weird. But I don't know. I also am non-binary, so there might be a reason why I had some of these thoughts earlier than some. God, my dog. A ton of the 1900s had extreme toxic masculinity that was perpetuated all the way up until even today. It's almost ingrained into people that it's the norm. Exactly, and that's all I'm saying. And all we have to do is try and stop those cycles. Just be the people to put our feet down and try and do better. That's literally it. But I remember learning about that perspective and just realizing how horrifying it must be to like pretty much know I can't go anywhere without someone trying to insert themselves in my life. And that's weird. And ever since I had that perspective, it pretty much made me the type of person that's like terrified to like, I feel like I'm inherently bothering a lot of women, which this isn't great either. This is also a problem. Like, I'm like so afraid to approach people even for friendship, because I just assume like, you've been bothered enough today. You've had enough random male presenting people walking over to you and like, you know, like, because I assume as soon as I say, oh, like, even if I say something little to someone like, I really like your nails, I just walk away. But like, even the moment I'm saying, I really like your nails, I'm thinking in my head, I know there's like on some level oh God, here it comes. You know what I mean? And I hate that, because I hate when I feel that way. So I don't know. I could just never be. Also, I am not comfortable with strangers, but that's always been me. So that's also different. I'm not a type of person that would really engage in hookup culture. I don't have judgment for it. I think it's fine. But like, I am not a person who feels comfortable enough or safe generally most of the time. And I definitely won't feel that way enough with someone I just met to engage physically, like at all, really, almost for certain. That's just never been me. But again, I have a specific past with specific traumas that has formed me that way. So I understand that, you know, while I understand this rhetoric and I can understand this perspective and I see its effects in society, it is not one I have personally ever felt. So I can't speak to the specifics of that pressure.
That persistence was a form of flattery. And I thought that, you know, if at first somebody was reluctant, you know, they're playing hard to get, just try harder. And if you think someone's feeling you, you know, make a physical advance.
So this is what we were talking about. Adapt what we were literally just talking about, that 1900s idea of like, you know, they're just playing hard to get. But the other thing he says, which I think is interesting, and I also think something a lot of us learned or had to learn at some point, is like, the subtle things that people used to do or still sometimes do to avoid rejection, like, oh, just go for it physically if it seems like the vibe's right, you know, and if they're into it, they'll definitely return. If not, they'll just reject you. One, how is that not inherently more awkward? Like, how is it not inherently more awkward to like try and engage someone physically and have them physically shut you down versus like asking? would you be interested in doing something, and then getting the yes or no. So like I always thought that was weird. Like you're not avoiding rejection. The only way you're avoiding, the way I learned that one, the way that one became internalized for me is, again, it was through working through my own abuse in the past and thinking about things there. But I realized one day that when you do that, you're actually just shifting the discomfort, which that's messed up. So you are worried about feeling insecure. You are worried about feeling rejected by asking. You don't want the opportunity for you to be embarrassed or hurt to happen. So what do you do instead? You physically force yourself or move towards a person, and you've now created a much more awkward situation where if someone wants to stop this, they have to physically shut you down, which is way harder to do and way scarier to do, especially if you were a person that was just engaged without your expectation, without you knowing it's coming, and if you don't want it. There are several reasons why you would inherently feel less safe as a woman, but also as the person who was just engaged suddenly. And to selfishly decide, I want this, but I don't want to be uncomfortable or risk being uncomfortable for it, so I'm just going to force that on you. That's inherently evil, in my opinion. Like, that's evil, objectively evil. I'm not saying that everyone who's ever done that ever was consciously aware that that's what they were doing or consciously doing something evil. I do think it definitely is the case sometimes, but that's what really solidified that idea, is like, oh, that's really wrong to me. Like when I finally thought about it from that perspective, I was like, it doesn't go away. Like the issue of rejection or like fear, like that fear shifts. It's no longer your fear of rejection. It's now their fear of being assaulted. And that's a much higher escalation of fear. I would like, it's crazy to me that at any point that was considered the play.
And see if they go with it. And I think that, especially I realized when so many young people, especially young men, rushed to defend.
I think this is important.
Stuff first started coming out, that this type of sex pest behavior is normalized, and a lot of people think this stuff is normal when I don't think that it is. And I think that I want to be fully responsible for not having a fluid understanding of consent and what enthusiastic two-way consent.
I did like that part. I like that he's acknowledging that like this certainly is a normalized behavior. It's a conversation that needs to be had, and it's important that we all have it. However, part of me can't help but look at this from like well, what's his legal team probably saying? What's his business end probably saying? Especially because it's posted on his private channel. And my first thought is, he's not wrong. You know, we're all victims of society. Like we were just talking about, we all have to do our own deprogramming. We all have to learn and grow on our own ways. But I can't help but feel like this on some level is like trying to paint this idea of, oh, so it wasn't Andrew, it was society. Society made him this way. You know, it wasn't his fault. And it's like, it all comes back to that, you know, whole thing. Like, I learned that when I was younger. How come you didn't figure that out when you were younger? Which is, I understand bullshit, but it just comes back to one of those things where, like, at what point do we expect a fully grown adult to just do the right thing? You know, like, at what point do we say, societal norms or not, you should have been pretty aware at this point in this day and age that there was something wrong here? And I don't know. I think it's circumstantial. I think it's different for everyone. It also doesn't really matter what I think as much, because I don't need to forgive him. I have nothing to forgive this person for. The only people who can and ideally would forgive him are his victims. And that's up to them, you know? And I say ideally for their own sake, not for his. But so like my thoughts are only so relevant, but it's more of just like my opinion on him using some of these tactics we've seen before, or some of these things I've seen. I don't even know if it's a tactic, but some of these talking points we've seen before, like, oh, well, society kind of sculpted me into the monster that it turned out I was.
It looks like.
Or even like the societal habit of calling these people monsters, even that's something we do. We like to pretend that like only certain kinds of people are capable of this. They are monsters. They are not humans. They are other. That's not even true. It's all of us. We're all capable of doing this crap. Most of us just know not to and agree not to. But there's a reason why in this country there's a problem with dads, uncles, priests, Hollywood directors, record label. Like, there's a reason this problem is rampant in a lot of issues. It's rampant in the world. It's rampant in our society. It's remnants of old societies, old standards that need to be cleaned up. But to do that, we need to talk about them and acknowledge them first.
That being said, a lot of the things that have been said online about me are not true. A lot of things are missing really important contextual information that I think would change people's interpretation of a lot of these situations, but I'm not here to invalidate anybody's lived experience. If you feel pressured,
I don't like that so much, only because I think there's critical information that would really change your opinion, but I'm not going to share this critical information. How critical is the information? And one thing I can't help but think about is a lot of these accounts in regard, people sharing their stories specifically mentioned him pumping women full of drinks, or him specifically trying to talk to a woman who was noticeably borderline blackout. And yeah, he may have also been drunk, but if there's a pattern of a person specifically getting people very drunk, or they happen to always end up talking to one of the people who are borderline unconscious at the party, now I'm seeing premeditation. Now I'm thinking you're a little aware of what you're doing. Now, what could the critical information possibly be? Is it that you were both drunk? This is speculation, obviously. I have no idea what the information is. But let's say the information is we were both drunk, so technically neither of us could give consent. Sure. I guess that's true. But one of you has a pattern of targeting very, very drunk people, and one of you was the very, very drunk person. I still feel like it's pretty easy to identify in that situation. There was an intent, there was a plan, there was arguably a premeditation, obviously not for that person, but for the concept of, I need to find someone who's very, very drunk. Which in and of itself is a complete objectification of that person. You're going into that situation thinking, I gotta find that one, not that person, not that human, and then I gotta use them for my thing because they will be usable in the state they're in. Like that is monstrous behavior that is inherently evil, and that I think is the real problem that I don't hear being talked about.
That's just what it is. I hope that young people, and young men in particular, can use my mistakes to learn and move through life with
That'd be great.
An understanding of consent. As far as what I have planned, I'm not really sure what comes next. I mean, obviously, reporting is my one true love, and I'm 25 years old, and I have my whole life ahead of me. But I really think that I need to do some serious work on myself and figure myself out. So I'm going to start therapy sessions pretty much immediately. Also, not to blame alcohol, but I truly believe that alcohol was a contributing factor to my poor decision making.
It 100% probably was. I'm not someone who's ever been really intimately involved with alcohol. I grew up emotionally and physically abused by a lot of alcoholics. I have a warped view of it. The only times in my life I really enjoyed alcohol, I was very sad, and it just made me feel, I guess, number. But I understand and have read that there is a high correlation for some people's brains and the way alcohol affects their brains in aggression, and also like sex drive and sexual aggression. Like, some people, when they get really drunk, those things just raise in them naturally. I don't understand the ins and outs of it so much, but I understand it enough to hear him out and understand that, like, yes, if you were drunk, it maybe compromised some things, or like made these situations more possible to happen. And I hear that, but again, I come back to we have this pattern that's been outlined of specifically targeting the drunkest girl, and also sometimes specifically serving girls lots of drinks, more drinks than he was consuming himself, and then trying to pursue them, which I don't think alcohol explains that. And I also don't think alcohol explains the routine behavior of doing it, of like, I'm just gonna keep drinking and keep doing it, you know, because like this is a different situation. I can't, like, I don't know how relevant this is, but I know for me personally, when I realized that I was only drinking alcohol to numb things when I was like 18, and I was like drunk one day before noon, I was literally faced and I was crying my eyes out watching New Girl. And I was like, what time is it even? And I saw that it was like barely noon, and then I was like, oh my god. And after that 2-week period, that it was like literally 2 weeks of like drinking every day, just getting I was like, I've seen this pattern. I know what this did to me as a kid. I watched so many people do this, and I was hurt by this. I cannot do this. And I pulled myself out of it. And pretty much since then, I little to no drinking. Only because I seem to have a warped relationship with it, me personally. So this isn't something I can fully grasp and comprehend as much, since I don't have as much experience with alcohol as an adult as many other people do. But I know for me personally, when I noticed it was leading to problematic situations and issues for my life, I nixed it. I got rid of it. But obviously, trauma makes everyone react to things differently, and sometimes it's specifically the numbing that you want because of things. I don't know, but like, this is just how I feel about the situation. I can also say that me personally, I would not feel safe with him in a room alone at this point. Even though I think he's done a fair amount to take accountability here, even though he seems genuine and contrite, and I do think he's going to try and do better. And everything about him as a person makes me think he will honestly try and do better. But I also can say, for myself, I would be very nervous and scared if I was in a room alone with him. And I wouldn't like to be. And those two things are true at the same time. It's not to say he's irredeemable. It's just to say right now, I don't know.
And I think that alcohol in general has had a devastating impact on my life. So I think I'm going to make the decision to join the 12-step program for Alcoholics Anonymous. And during this journey into sobriety, I want to take a serious step back from public life. And
that's amazing. It's honestly amazing. If he feels he has identified an unhealthy relationship with alcohol and is taking the steps to step away from it, that is beautiful. That is amazing. And I have no doubt that it will actually help him with his mental health struggles and maybe even his relationship with women. I hope. It does make me nervous again to hear blame. And he even said, he started this off saying not to blame alcohol, but I can't help but feel like the bulk of this video was two things. One, society kind of shaped me this way, and two, alcohol played a huge role. So the two main points of this video were why this happened, like, you know, or like what caused me to do it. That makes me nervous. I think it was probably legal advice. But again, I have a lot of concerns around like the pattern that was outlined of getting girls drunk or targeting drunk girls. I think that outlines a level of premeditation that is not acknowledged here and is extremely worrisome, and predatorial, objectively predatorial, literally predatorial, like looking for the specific person you want. Like, so while I am happy for him that he has identified a personal issue and is on a path to becoming a better person, I can't help but feel like there could have been more accountability here, both in terms of acknowledgement of certain patterns that were outlined and truths that were shared, as well as maybe sharing that critical information you believe is critical, and just acknowledging your role. You did this, you know? Whether or not it was made easier to do by alcohol or were thought to be okay because of society, you did the action. And it's important to acknowledge that, I think. I don't know. I just wish there would have been a little more of that.
And I hope that this reaches the ears of anyone who's felt affected by me. I'd love to reach out to you, or you can reach out to me, even just for me to say, I'm sorry. And I really apologize, and I appreciate you all. I also want to apologize to my closest collaborators.
My blood sugar is so low. I'm sorry.
And people who will have to wear this stain on their career forever. You guys don't deserve this, and I love you guys. That being said, if you never want to watch Channel 5 again,
it does really suck for everyone that's collabed with Channel 5. And I understand why they're stepping away. Also, I don't know if I'll be watching Channel 5 ever again. I definitely stopped supporting the Patreon. Especially because some of this specifically involved traveling around the country and doing it to people in the middle of nowhere. You know, well, not the middle of nowhere, but all over. Which is probably why he was able to get away with it for so long. And again, in my mind, shows some level of awareness. But hard to argue without knowing the guy personally. I can say right now, I don't feel comfortable watching his stuff, promoting his stuff, and I would not feel safe with him in a room. Obviously, whether or not I feel safe with him in a room is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It's just where I'm coming from and why I have the perspective I have. If I still feel like I personally wouldn't feel safe around a person, then clearly, you know, I don't think they're that great of a person, and I'm not buying the full thing. You know, I'm not... The benefit of the doubt is not being given if I feel like, oh, I still want to be around him.
I understand. I hope you remember the missions of radical empathy and media literacy that we have tried to put into the world through our coverage. All right, that's all I want to say.
So yeah, that's Andrew Callaghan's response so far to everything. I think there's some key things that weren't acknowledged. Oh wow, he watched it. I think there are some key things that weren't acknowledged. I think it's a legally safe response, but obviously it was always going to be. And I think, I don't know. It's just, I mean, hopefully, if nothing else, a honest and sincere open dialogue about nuanced consent happens. Hopefully, if nothing else, all the people who came out in support of him and said, I don't understand the problem, hopefully they now see the problem. That, like, ideally, that would be what would happen here. Like, a big bulk of the next generation just learns what is not okay. Which, these situations are always so confusing to me. I don't know how they get handled legally. Like, I hear that, because it's like, basically the whole reason the Me Too movement even started is because things weren't being handled legally. Women would try to go to the police. They either weren't believed or swept under the rug or no one was prosecuted. So the solution was to go public, because that's the only way we can maybe make people pay. And then people started realizing when they go public, it turns out there's a slew of other victims for a lot of these people who can attest and have their own accounts and stories. Which at that point kind of forces law enforcement to get involved. And it's still that way. Women still aren't believed. It still gets swept under the rug. I mean, look at what we learned from the UK. The UK basically doesn't care at all. So, I don't know how these things get approached or handled legally, but that is the next step I'd like to see, is like someone being held accountable. Regardless of not whether they take responsibility, legally held accountable for the fucked up thing they did. It's a great way to learn. If you ask our prison system, apparently it's the best way to learn. If you're a minority and you're 12 and you stole something, yeah, go ahead and hit them with a fucking book and send them to juvie for like 4 years. But like this guy, or you know, your Brock Turners have you 3 months. Like, are you? The biases are plain as day. The difference of treatment is plain as day. And that's the next step, is seeing a shift in that. Seeing these things actually being prosecuted, actually being pursued, and people actually held accountable. And that's all I can hope, is actual justice for the victims. Thanks for watching, guys. Follow me on Twitch to join us live. Like and subscribe, and I will catch you later.